Today we will discuss a short story written by Kate Chopin called as The Story of an Hour. The Story of an Hour is a short story that explores themes of freedom, identity, and the constraints of marriage. The story is set in the late 19th century, primarily in the Mallard household. It begins with the news that Brentley Mallard, the husband of Louise Mallard, has died in a railroad accident. Before jumping into the plot summary, let us have a brief outlook about the characters in this story. The first is Louise Mallard, the protagonist, a young woman with heart trouble who initially reacts with shock to the news of her husband's death but soon experiences an unexpected emotional transformation. The second character is Brentley Mallard, who is Louis' husband, who is mistakenly reported to have died in a train accident. The third is Josephine, who is Louis's sister, and the fourth is Richards, who is Brentley's friend who first learns of the train accident and brings the news to the Mallard household. Now let's directly jump into the plot summary. The story opens with Richards and Josephine delicately informing Louis of Brentley's death. Given Louis's heart condition, they are cautious, fearing the news might be too much for her to bear. Upon hearing the news, Louis initially weeps with sudden, wild abandonment. This reaction is expected and mirrors traditional mourning behaviors. Josephine comforts her, but Louis soon seeks solitude in her room, asking to be left all alone. In the privacy of her room, Louise sits in an armchair, looking out of an open window. She begins to process her feelings and experiences a profound internal shift. As she gazes at the sky, the trees, and hears the distant sounds of life outside, she realizes with growing excitement that she is free. She whispers, "Free, free, free," to herself, acknowledging a newfound sense of liberation from her marriage. Louise reflects on her marriage, recognizing that although her husband was kind and loving, his death has released her from the confines of their relationship. She relishes the prospect of living for herself, making her own choices, and experiencing life on her own terms. The notion of independence fills her with joy and anticipation. Josephine, worried about Louis's long isolation, implores her to come out. Louis eventually opens the door and descends the stairs with a sense of triumph and newfound freedom. As Louis descends, the front door opens and Brentley Mallard enters the house, alive and well. He had been far from the sense of the accident and is unaware of any tragedy. The shock of seeing her husband alive is too much for Louis, and she collapses and dies. The story ends with the doctors arriving and determining that Louis is dead of heart disease, of joy that kills. This final ironic twist highlights the gap between the true cause of her death and the doctor's interpretation, as they are unaware of her emotional journey and the profound sense of freedom she had just experienced. And with this, the story comes to an end. Now let's discuss the themes and analysis of the story. The first important theme has been freedom and independence. Louise's reaction to her husband's death reveals her deep yearning for personal freedom and independence, which she feels marriage has denied her. The second theme is the constraints of marriage. Chopin critiques the institution of marriage, suggesting that it can be repressive and stifling, particularly for women in the 19th century. The third important theme is irony. The story is rich in irony, particularly in the final twist where Louise dies just as she has tasted freedom, and the doctors mistakenly believe she died from the joy of seeing her husband alive. And the fourth important theme is emotional complexity. Louise's complex emotional response to her husband's death highlights the nuanced inner life of women and challenges the simplistic views of female emotions and roles of the women in the society. The story of an hour is a masterful exploration of the interplay between societal expectations and individual desires, encapsulating a powerful critique of the limitation placed on women in the 19th century. Chopin's deft handling of irony and her portrayal of Louis's brief moment of liberation make this story a poignant and thought provoking read.